Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. This is Adam Russo from the FIA Group, and welcome to our April Spring Edition webinar. I'm just happy to be back. Ron, I missed a month. I missed one. Where was I last month at this time on our webinar?
Man, I don't know, Adam, but you were definitely missing. I was sitting in your seat. I kept it warm for you.
It's funny you say that you were sitting in my seat. I mean, I think these folks here at FIA are actually happier when I'm not at the office. I think there's like parties that continues to go on. I'm not sure. But what I know is this, folks, we're excited about this webinar. We're very happy and honored to have all of you dial in. It's absolutely fantastic that you're all here. So, as always, I want to make sure we talk about what our topic is for today. It's evolving healthcare issues and the events that you need to know. Basically, what we want to say is, here's how you become smarter than everyone else in your office. So, to those thousands of you who are on our webinar right now, we want to thank you all. We're very honored. We're obviously humbled by the fact that you all decide take 1 hour out of your busy schedules or during the week to dial in, especially when there's so many different conferences going on. So with that, I want to make sure I introduce my fellow hosts and my sometimes guests. But as you know, I'm Adam Russo, the good-looking guy on the left. With me, as always, is our Senior Vice President, no longer our Executive Vice President. He has now moved up, I guess, to Senior because of the lack of hair.
Older.
You notice the lack of hair in that photo, folks? So I want to thank you and welcome Ron E. Peck. Say hello, Ron.
Hello, Ron.
He's here every month because he has to be. No one else in the office knows anything about what's going on in Washington, D.C., except for our fine attorney, Brady C. Pizarro. Say hello, Brady.
Hello, Brady.
And last but not least, the only reason she's here is because otherwise we'd have no viewers or listeners. Say hello to our Vice President of our consulting, our PGC VP, PGC VP. Right? Or is it VP of PGC?
You know what? I think either way works, Adam. I can't think. I don't think there's a VP of PGC that should be stepping on their toes.
Perfect.
We're going to be okay.
With that, Jennifer M. McCormick. Say hello, Jen.
Hello.
Again, why can't she just say the word Jen? Why can't she follow the lead of everyone else? Why do you have to be different?
She respects my intellectual property, unlike Brady.
Oh, this is your thing.
That is my thing.
But you should be happy. When people copy you, I try to tell my little kids.
Imitation.
Like my 3-year-old gets mad. My 5-year-old gets mad when my 3-year-old copies her. She's like, she goes, Shay, stop copying me. And I try to explain to them, when people copy you, that means that they think you're cool. Like, that's good.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Bingo. Brady just wants to be you, Ron.
I don't blame him.
So much, in fact, that he's been talking badly about you to hopefully take your job. I think that's what's going on. I've noticed he's gone to HR a few times to complain about you.
I don't think he's going to HR about me, but anyway.
Anyways, folks, as you can tell, we're just in a really good mood because it's 40 degrees outside and rainy. It's absolutely beautiful April day, but I think the weather's going to turn. I mean, it's been raining for like, how many days straight now?
40 days and 40 nights.
So normally at my house, I might see like 1 or 2 frogs. I've literally seen 20 frogs. I saw a gray frog, like that matched the stone. Like he's camouflaged. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like freaking out. Every time I go outside, I'm afraid I'm going to get hopped on. Like, I'm not joking.
This is pretty biblical, Adam. I'm starting to think if you see locust or pestilence, you better let us know.
I know. I read that story in the Bible too, Ron. Please, folks, as always, follow us on LinkedIn. Look for the FIA Group. You will not be disappointed. You don't have to listen to my voice. You can just read articles, and if you want to, you can watch some of the videos on there. In addition, this is by far our fastest growing area is our iTunes podcast. People obviously give us kudos all the time, especially younger folks, the future leaders, as Brady likes to hang out with. They love listening to our podcast. I sometimes make my wife listen to it in the car, and she says to me, Jen, I love this. She goes, Adam, you really realize that instead of just talking to me right now, you're making me listen to you talk. I'm like, yeah, but it's different. Like, Ron's there, and Brady's there.
It's a party.
Right, it's fun. Like, listen to the podcast. But she doesn't like them. She's not a fan, Ron. She does not enjoy a podcast.
Adam, you mentioned this also. We're actually on Google Podcasts. I didn't realize this, and the recent download, the Android update on all the phones made the Google Podcast. It's hooked up to the car.
I don't see it here. I don't see it on the screen.
I was very excited. I was searching it. I looked for Ron Burgundy and the FIA Group, the 2 most entertaining podcasts I could find.
So should we add that onto the slide next time?
I think so. We captured both sides of the market.
So, folks, just so you know, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is because you asked us to, as you always do. We ask you to email us for any topics, even when we have a specific topic. If there's any subtopics you want to discuss, like subsection A, B, and C, as you normally see. So, with that, I want to make sure next we give a special shout-out to Dr. Tremblay. How'd this guy get this thing?
It's a random drawing.
It must be a random drawing. No, I'm only kidding. Michael Tremblay, he is my personal doctor. He is our DP. He's Ron. He's your DPC doctor.
Yeah, actually, I have a big exam coming up, which is why he's on there. I want him to be gentle.
So, folks, if you ever wonder what DPC is, Ron right here is Ron uses them. Brady, do you work with Dr. Tremblay?
I do not.
He does not.
Brady doesn't go to the doctor. He's perfect.
Perfect. So Brady does not take advantage of FIA's amazing DPC program, which would pay for 100% for you to have your own personal doctor that you can have a 2-hour exam with. And I think that's why Ron is being so nice.
I've never been in better health in my life.
You don't want Tremblay to do anything weird to you. You just want to be really nice to Tremblay right now. You're afraid of this upcoming physical.
It's cold outside. I don't need cold hands.
Understood. But obviously, folks, Jen, you don't use Dr. Tremblay either, do you?
Far from me.
So half the people in this room use Dr. Tremblay. We love direct primary care. He's a great guy. And to be honest, he listens to all of our webinars. How is he listening to our webinar right now? Is he possibly listening?
Maybe he's in a car.
Is it in his speaker? Is he having it on his speaker while he's performing a physical?
Well, that's one of the benefits of DPC, Adam. His schedule, he's able to focus more time on each individual patient as well as schedule in opportunities to learn about advancements in medicine instead of focusing on processing people every 5 minutes.
Dr. Tremblay must have something on Ron, I guess. But folks, want to give a special shout out. As always, if you are an avid fan of FIA, you will get the complete package, the backpack, the phones, the charger, the pens, the T-shirts, whatever it might be, you'll get it all. Next, the face of FIA. As you know, these 3 people we recently talked about in our podcast. We obviously want to bring them up here. Boris Senich, Maya, I'm not even going to say her last name. Is it Tim Hanker? That's right. And Amanda Grogan. Folks, if you look at Boris up top, Boris is literally 55. It looks like he's 55 years old. He's actually 30. He started working at FIA, I think he was 12. Same with Amanda Grogan. Amanda Grogan has been here for over 10 years. I think she's just turned 25.
Yes, there may be something illegal there.
I think 2 of the 3 people on Face of FIA were hired illegally over a decade ago.
If you're a volunteer, is it illegal?
I guess not. So these 3 folks are Face of FIA. Please download our podcast. You can hear the great interviews we have with these folks as well. So, folks, what is today's talk? Problem, purpose, process every single time. Last month's PGCs, FAQs, which we presented by the VP of PGC. Political update from our political insider, Brady, Pizarro. The PBM hearings, I mean, how boring can they be? I mean, can you get any worse?
Oh, come on.
You happen to be in high school, and you get to go to Capitol Hill, and you're all excited about going in, and you go, what's the topic? And they go, PBM hearings.
Right. And you're like, are those the drug manufacturers? No. These are the guys that talk to the drug manufacturers.
Like, you can't get worse than this. Anyways, evolving issues and events. This is what we're going to talk about in detail. The FDA warning regarding the Canadian drug importation. Guys, how many emails, phone calls, and have we had on this? Thousands?
It's outrageous.
Right. So we're going to talk about it. The ACA contraceptive mandate case. What now? Is that right? Hey, put the question mark on there, Ron Burgundy. What now?
What now?
What now? HHS to conduct random HIPAA compliance testing. This is crazy.
Yep.
Like, I'm afraid to walk around our office. Now we have all these tags. Folks, yesterday I was given a tag to wear. It had the FIA group on it. It's a badge, and it has my picture. I'm sitting there going, I built this company. I have to have a picture of me so people know who I am? It's ridiculous. Anyways, this is going to be pretty scary. Next, the federal judge strikes down AHP initiative. And last but not least, the federal judge blocks some Medicaid work requirements. Really cool stuff that we're going to get into. Next, what is the problem, guys? As we all talk about, it's really simple. Healthcare and health insurance cost too much. Why? Who knows? But what's our job is to make it affordable for all employers and their employees, because every hardworking American deserves access to high-quality, affordable healthcare. Very important. Quality and affordable.
Exactly.
Not just affordable, but health quality. You need both, which is very important. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen McCormick. Jen, take it away.
All right. Some FAQs here. What's happened in the world of PGC? All right, question number 1. Can a high-deductible health plan enrolled individual over 65 still utilize an HSA? So the concern with this here is that there are people who are continuing to work as they are aging. And if you are continuing to work and you are still aging, and you are currently enrolled in your employer-based plan, but you're also going to become eligible for Medicare, that's going to create a consequence or some things to look out for when it comes to whether or not you can maintain and still have that HSA. So the rule here, what to remember is that if an individual, an employee, a member turns 65 and they still have that employer-based sponsored, that means they have to avoid that Medicare enrollment status if they still want to maintain that HSA. You can't have both. So that's something to be looking out for. If you have people that are turning 65, look at the plan to see whether it is in fact a high deductible health plan, and that's going to dictate whether or not they can still utilize that HSA. Question number 2, can a plan limit dialysis treatment by number of visits? So this has been something that we've been round and round about a number of times in the past. It's relevant when it comes to the ACA requirements in the sense that if it is an essential health benefit, we cannot have a dollar limitation. So people are looking for ways, not only specific to dialysis, but looking specific to other type of benefits. What can I do to minimize my exposure? Is there something that I can do here that I will make sure that I am not going to be in violation of ACA or the Medicare Secondary Payer Act violations, for instance? So when it comes to the Medicare Secondary Payer Act, what we're looking to avoid is making sure that we are not discriminating against people who have end-stage renal dialysis or renal disease. So making sure that is not the case, what we can do here is by putting a visit or frequency limitation on dialysis, not imposing a cost or a dollar limit. And specifically, here's the federal regulation here that allows us to do this. So keep this in mind if there's ever a question about what it is that you may be able to do when it comes to dialysis. And last but not least, how does a plan's RBP program interact with stop loss? I feel like this is quite the loaded question here. So I'll give some highlights here. And this is something that if there are further questions, people can reach out to. So when it comes to an RBP plan, there are certain parameters that must be outlined within the plan document to ensure that the plan providers, the members, are all aware of how the claims are going to be processed in accordance with the plan document. We want to make sure that that language is as tight as possible so we can ensure that we are minimizing any consequences or impact to the actual plan and the members to the extent possible. But when doing that, we want to make sure that not only is it going to be clear for everyone, but what's going to happen with balance billing. Maybe we don't want to have member bad will or create concerns for a matter of a couple $100. Maybe although we have this super tight plan language, we want to minimize all of this noise by maybe negotiating a little bit more to make sure that we are looking out for everyone's best interest, resolving the balance billing problem. But what's going to happen if we want to do those negotiations, but we have this plan language that maybe doesn't allow us? What's going to happen if there's a stop loss claim that's going to come in? That's why it's really important to have that collaboration, that transparency at the outset. So when it comes to a particular type of claim, that we're knowing in advance what the plan is going to pay and what stop loss is going to be able to reimburse. And the way that we can craftily and creatively handle that with plan language is by, yes, outlining all those parameters in the plan document, but making sure that there is a specific note that there is the negotiated amount, which is going to be what the plan will pay. That is going to protect you from having any conflicts between the plan document and a stop loss carrier as far as reimbursement is concerned, and give you that little bit of leeway to resolve some of those minor balance billing cases and making sure that everyone is on the same page. But again, if you have other questions on that, feel free to reach out and always be transparent when it comes to talking to all the entities that are involved in stop loss. I think at this point I will turn it over to you, Brady.
Hey, really quick question. And I've been speaking about it lately really passionately, to be honest. What percentage of the time would you say, Jen, when we get email to our office, is it related to a broker, let's say, typically, right, saying, how do we not cover something? How do we not cover a particular drug? And we're going to talk about the drugs now, but to me, it shouldn't be the first option. The first answer, that's the wrong way to say it. The first thing I should be doing is going, this drug is really expensive or this procedure is really expensive. How do I not cover it? Versus maybe there's a better way to cover it, a cheaper alternative instead of not covering it all. I mean, what percentage of the time do you say that's literally what people are asking us to do?
When there is a change to plan language, that's the answer. They're looking to avoid paying for something. by carving it out, excluding it? Maybe it's for stop loss, maybe it's for a particular circumstance.
I think one of the big problems that I noticed, though, is that the whole point of this is employee benefits, right? We're trying to have better benefits for the employee so that they're healthier, right? And then they want to stay at your organization. I just think too often the first thing that people are trying to do is say, don't cover it. Find a way not to cover this drug that is really needed by a particular individual. I just think it doesn't set a positive image for self-funding when it's looked upon by the outside world, by the regulators, by the carriers, that, oh, self-funding, yeah, they just don't cover anything. They just deny everything or carve it out. And I think it's a wrong message to send.
I mean, Adam, isn't that kind of the same philosophy behind the high deductible plans also, which I know a few years ago when they really started to get popular, you railed against those too for more or less the same reason.
Right.
It's this feeling that, look, the only way to reduce the cost of the plan is by reducing the quality of the plan.
Well, to give you an example, folks on the phone that dialed in, in the state of Massachusetts, I have heard numerous times how premiums have not increased in 3 years. Like, premiums are flat. Yet, they don't tell you, with a little asterisk on the bottom of the screen, that the deductibles have tripled in the past 3 years.
Right.
So, yeah, the premium is the same, but now people have a $3,000 on average deductible versus a $1,000 average deductible.
Sure.
So, yeah, it has increased. People have to pay $3,000 more than they did 3 years ago. And I think that's part of what I know that Brady's going to get into, but to me, and someone made a comment, I think I see a guy named Dan here, it's laziness, quite honest. But what we're trying to tell you folks is, come to us, we'll give you potential solutions. The right solution isn't always to find a way not to cover something. Brady?
Yeah, we always say, Adam, that's an extreme approach, right? If you do that, there are other options you can try first. Tackling cost is one of them, and the next few slides on the political update here are about just that issue, because we're talking once again about specialty drugs. It's something we hear all the time when we're on the road. We get questions about it. The spending is out of control. And one question I get asked a lot, and we get asked a lot, is what do we mean by specialty drug? What are we talking about when we discuss this category of drugs? They're typically just high-cost drugs that are used to treat chronic or complex or rare conditions. And they account for less than 1% of all prescriptions in the U.S., but they represent more than 1/3 of total spending. And by 2020, they could reach 50% of all drug sales, according to Seagal Consulting. That's a huge number. And already today, the average cost to employers of providing treatment to someone who's on just one specialty drug already exceeds the average wage or the median wage in this country, which is $49,000. So think about that. It's already costing employers, or it could cost employers more to provide treatment to an employee on one specialty drug than it does to pay their entire salary for a year. That's why this issue is so important, and that's why it's being discussed in Congress. And recently, earlier this month, there were two very important hearings. One of them is a series of hearings that's happening in the Senate about drug pricing in America. So I wanted to break down some of the highlights of what happened in these hearings, because they were very, very important. And actually, they were very popular as well. I was reading from the articles that there were overflow crowds, there was a lot of protesters, and just a lot of action. And the reason is because this issue is really, really important and sensitive to millions of Americans, and obviously employers who are trying to do their best to provide affordable coverage options to their employees. So the two hearings were, I mentioned, in the Senate, the Finance Committee, that was earlier this month, and as well in the House. And the hearings involved both PBMs, the largest PBMs in the country, and in one case in the House, the three manufacturers of insulin. So what I did is that even though the first hearing chronologically is a Senate hearing, I think I want to discuss the House hearing first. And the reason for that is because it really highlights the case study drug that is really spearheading the whole discussion about drug pricing, and that has been insulin. There's been stories in the news, you've probably seen them in your local news, over and over and over again about insulin prices and how they're out of control, and literally people are dying. I mean, there's stories I was reading before this of someone who turned 26 years old, lost coverage under his parents' plan. He learned that his insulin cost, which he needs insulin every day, was going to cost him $1,300 a month. He couldn't afford it. He started rationing the use of insulin, fell into a diabetic coma, and was found dead in his apartment. So that's the kind of stories you hear in these congressional hearings. And this drug, insulin, is really driving the conversation. 30 million Americans have diabetes. Millions more have pre-diabetes. So Congress is paying attention, and they're using this as the wedge issue to spotlight the problems with drug pricing. So what I've done here is I really just posed the Q&A, the most important Q&A that I thought occurred in this hearing. Remember, this one in the House was attended by the three manufacturers of insulin and three large PBMs, CVS, Express Scripts, and Optum Rx. And when they asked the manufacturers, why do list prices keep increasing of insulin, there was silence. There wasn't really a good answer
Well,
for
what
why
was the
that
best
happened.
answer? What is the best answer you heard?
They say that they need prices to go up to fund research and development.
Right,
That's the stock line. The truth, however, in the case of insulin at least, is that this is a drug that's been around for almost a century.
And is the insulin getting better? Are they making new R&D for insulin?
No. And in fact,
Sorry, I apologize. So now I'm getting into this.
Yeah.
So you're telling me the insulin price is going up because they have to do R&D on other products,
Correct.
Yep.
but not on insulin.
Right. It's like they're saying college football is financing the other sports. They're saying that,
We have to raise the price of a college football ticket because we have to support men's soccer.
Right. So the argument is, for instance, this is a chronic disease. We're doing research and development on a cure, but that's expensive. But it's the same, if you think about it, it's the same arguments that have been made for years and years and years in response to international drug purchasing. People say, hey, you can get the drug much cheaper in Canada or the UK, and they say, yeah, but that's because they're trying to undermine our research and development. You pay more in the US because we're so advanced and we come up with the ideas first.
The important part in the article here was that they mentioned that when insulin first came to market in 1996, it was $21 a vial. Today, it's $275 for the same vial of insulin. There's no excuse for that.
You should see the price of some MS drugs.
Right. Oh,
It's even bigger than that.
But
that have been around for years. That have gone up.
Chronic diseases, I mean, there are those who would say, look, it's either buy it or die, so.
Right.
So a couple more interesting factoids.
And you can't not cover it.
Right. You have to cover
because
it. Millions of Americans had diabetes. 30 million of them.
Yeah.
Right. So you had, right before this hearing, interestingly enough, one of the manufacturers, Sanofi, cut the price of insulin hours before the hearing, as if it was going to sort of prevent the onslaught that they faced. But essentially what happened here is that they pointed fingers at each other, blaming one another for what happened here. And this hearing was important because the chairman is very important, is a man called Frank Pallone, a Democrat from New Jersey, who used to be a lot more on the side of manufacturers about the free market. And he was saying in this case, clearly what's happened is that the free market has broken down with regard to pricing. And insulin is the best example of that. So you had a lot of threat sort of made. One congresswoman even said, how do you guys sleep at night? Your days are numbered. So what's happened, I think, from the House hearing that we can take away from this is that the PBMs are going to continue claiming that if you force list prices to go down by regulating them, it's going to eliminate access to this drug for millions of Americans. They also highlighted things like patient assistance and charity programs to see, show us how good they've been doing. But I have more on that in a slide later on to show why those programs aren't doing so well either. But the takeaway from the House hearing is that insulin prices are going to result in, I think, some kind of regulation or action. If not setting list prices, they're going to start looking for ways, particularly in Medicare Part D programs, to either negotiate the price of these important drugs or potentially eliminate the rebates. They've already done that in a proposed rule associated with these drugs. So we'll have to watch and see. But this hearing was super important.
Basically, the price will keep going up, especially now that they're worried about price control down the road.
Right, and what you've seen some of the manufacturers are preemptively trying to take action, like cutting their prices literally an hour before the hearing, thinking that's going to help save them from this problem. But it didn't actually work in the end. But the House hearing, as interesting as it was followed by, or in this case it happened the day before, a Senate hearing that was just on PBMs. I think this one was actually more important because of really what could come out of this hearing. And the 5 PBMs that attended, I listed them here, but take note the fact that we have 3 PBMs who account for 80% of the private market. That's CVS, Optum, and Express Scripts. So you have a lot of consolidation there. The argument is that that's been driving prices up. And you had the same kind of back and forth finger pointing in this hearing that you had in the House hearing, where the PBMs were blaming the manufacturers for the price increases and vice versa. But the takeaways here was that this is mostly about rebates. PBMs are downplaying the role that rebates play, saying that there's no way that rebates are driving up costs. But if that's the case, then why are they so insistent upon keeping rebates as the way they are? Really, the hearing boiled down to describing what a PBM is, what it does. Most people in Congress have no clue what a PBM does. But a lot of evidence is presented that shows, or at least indicates, that the list price of a drug is arguably raised higher knowing that a rebate will be offered. It's kind of like we talk about with hospital pricing, right? Oh, you're going to get a network discount. So the same kind of problem was highlighted. And I think, again, what came out of this was frustration. The powerful chairman of this committee also said, if you guys don't fix this problem, we will fix it for you. And I think because of that, we expect to see some action. But I want to take a closer look really quick at rebates, because that was what these hearings are mostly about.
And Brady, take a deep breath real quick.
Yeah.
Most people have no idea how this rebate process works. Right. I want to spend a couple of minutes on this, guys. So let's just, people can read it. They can go on our website. They can look at it all.
Yeah.
Let's just give us a
30,000.
ninth grade level, that's what grade level does the plan doc have to be? Eighth grade, sorry. Give me the 8th grade plan doc example of what a rebate is.
Well, you won't find the rebate information in the plan doc, but you'll find it in the PBM contract. Effectively, what you've got going on is you have health plans typically will provide more favorable formulary placement of a drug in exchange for rebates. We'll say, we'll put it on your formulary if you give us a rebate off the list price because we want to see reduced prices. But the evidence has been suggesting that the manufacturers know this and they're raising the price even higher to account for the rebate process.
So because they know they'll get because they know there's a rebate,
right.
At the end of the day, the patient's paying the same net because if there's a lower price without a rebate and a higher price with the rebate.
So actually, the example we show here,
Yep.
the patient actually pays more because their copayment is based off the list price rather than the negotiated price. So in the example here, and feel free to read this through here because I think it gives a good example of how the rebate process works exactly. But notice here you have the manufacturer pricing a drug at $100. The PBM negotiates that down to $80.
So the PBM negotiates to 80.
Yep.
Got it.
And the fee that the PBM is charging is based on that $100 instead of the $80.
Not to 80.
Right.
How do you get to do that?
Good question. Well, the PBM contract, I'm sure, allows for it, which most people aren't reading it. So there's extra profit baked in there for the PBM to begin with.
If I'm selling a house, right? I'm selling a house. I list the house at $1 million, right? I'm the broker. I list it at $1 million. It sells for $500,000.
Right.
I'm charging my broker fee based on the $1 million list price.
It's a good deal, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Then why would he just list everything at $10 million and sell for $500,000?
Well, then I'll cash on.
And that the negotiated discount is kept secret. It's something that they don't reveal. It's
We're
in the
used to
secret
that.
contract.
We're used to those secret
Right.
stuff, right?
So how does this screw the patient? The patient, as I mentioned, obtains a drug from the pharmacy. They're paying a copay based on a list price, so that $1 million house, instead of the $80.
So the patient, the broker, the
patient.
The PBM makes out,
Correct.
and then the patient gets hurt.
Yep, and the plan's getting hurt because the list price is already increased to account for this rebate that was baked in. So not a good situation for plans, and that's why you've seen so much focus on rebates.
Now, what I'm seeing a lot of though in our industry is this. Now, Jen, what I'm seeing is people coming to us saying, "Hey, they make a program, call it whatever, XYZ program, and the program is we're not going to cover the drugs." And instead, we will create this new code to assist patients to identify ways to get their drugs for free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So talk about this.
Sure.
And this is growing
It is.
exponentially because of the fact that drug prices are getting higher. People are trying to carve out or exclude. Hence, the patient still needs those drugs. Patient assistance programs.
Right, and it works really great publicity-wise for these manufacturers because they can claim that they're helping, and maybe they have some intention of doing so in helping patients afford these expensive drugs, but they're spending $4 billion per year on these programs, and what some evidence suggests is what's happening here is it's actually directing patients to choose the brand name drug when it's a generic alternative, right? Because it's reducing their out-of-pocket costs. So again, I gave, I think, a pretty good example. Feel free to read through the whole thing here, but I used a $10,000 drug as an example where the generic costs $2,000 and the member is incentivized to go with a more expensive $10,000 option because
they have no copay.
Because the copay coupon, right, that the brand manufacturer offers directs them away from the generic. The plan is getting stuck with that big bill.
We have all seen those commercials where they literally say, "Here's the coupon, so that you don't have to pay the $400 or the $500. Yet the plan is paying $30,000 instead of $500."
Right. The best part is if you go to the pharmacy, the pharmacist can't even tell you.
Right.
Well, actually, not true. That was
Whoa, Jen,
See that?
Brady just called you out.
that I think it was in the last slide, but there used to be the gag rules. Used to be a gag,
But you can ask.
You can, they
But
won't
they can't-
affirmatively. Well, they can't.
tell you.
They now can't
Very
affirmatively
upset.
tell you.
You notice that? Jen is not happy with Brady for that.
Pharmacist didn't tell her.
Maybe he's
I'm upset. I want my $30,000
maybe
back.
Brady's angling for her job now instead. I don't know. I don't know what's happening here.
That was a good thing that Term Research did last fall, where they got rid of these gag rules. So if you do ask, they can tell you about an alternative.
But you have to ask.
There, but you have to ask. They're not going to go out there and do it. Absolutely. So what action could be next here? Let's get this part wrapped up here. I think what's likely to happen is you're going to continue seeing PBMs and other manufacturers take preemptive action to try and avoid regulation.
But this has been going on for years.
It has. But look at my fourth bullet point here: bipartisanship. So Congress is Congress is unpopular, but drug makers are even more unpopular. And you have two people I put two of them there, Chuck Grassley, Ron Wyden, Democrat, Republican, powerful ranking member and committee chair working together in ways that haven't been done before.
Okay.
I think we'll see some action here.
Folks, as you can tell, Brady, like, no matter what, Brady's always going to stick up for these politicians. Like, always.
I'm optimistic.
All right. I am too. I'm an optimist as well.
He has the congressional trading
However,
cards. Like, he's got these guys.
Brady, we always love your fortune telling. What's your prognosis? What do you think is going to happen? We put a gun to your head, Brady. What's going to happen? What action is going to happen? Anything? Nothing?
I think there will be something. Someone asked me a similar question about Medicare for all. I think what's going to happen. See, I underlined here the Medicare.
Of course, someone asked you about Medicare for all. Why would it be?
For this webinar, it was the Medicare Negotiation and Competitive Licensing Act. This is an idea where you're going to use Medicare as the experimental sort of ground for this. I think you're going to see that in drug pricing. Medicare Part D involves private insurance providing drugs to Medicare beneficiaries. They've already proposed a rule to ban rebates for Medicare Part D. I think you might see some kind of price setting for just Medicare or negotiations that are allowed. I've also heard there's a bill out there about arbitration, basically forcing these private manufacturers to negotiate with the government. I think you'll see that first. If it succeeds, you might see it in the private sector. But I think
what he's really telling us is nothing's going to happen.
He's basically Medicare. Medicare is basically going to do with drugs, but it does with healthcare.
I'm saying
they're going to strong arm their own prices
for the next webinar.
You're saying nothing. You tell us nothing. That's okay.
I think there was a lot of information there, hopefully. But I'm going to turn it back over to Ron. He'll give you even more information about FDA warnings.
Yeah. Hey,
Ron,
drugs.
Before you get carried away here, again, folks,
I'm out of here.
A lot of people have been calling us about this. Please listen. If you're still not sure of the answer, you can pick up the phone and contact us or email us, have your own private conversation. We're going to do our best that we can based on what the current law is to explain the situation. And just be aware, we still know of tens of thousands of plans, employers, municipalities that are still doing this.
Correct.
It has not changed their process at all.
Right.
Where some people that are new to it or thinking about doing it might shy away. What we have seen with the hundreds of thousands of lives, the hundreds of thousands of plans that we work with, have we had a single client that's been doing this that's dropped it because of this so far?
A couple.
Maybe a couple, yeah.
Yeah.
But nothing
Not
substantial.
the dramatic thing I think people were expecting.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Ron, so just for a little background information, we have, I think since the beginning, we've been explaining when people ask, is drug importation legal or illegal? We compare it to, for instance, if you're doing 65 miles per hour on an interstate where the miles per hour limit is 55 miles per hour, you're doing 10 over the limit. If I ask you, is that illegal? Technically yes, but has anybody been pulled over and issued a speeding ticket for doing 65 and a 55? Probably not. And that's because of this concept of selective enforcement. And the same way here, particularly if it's the patient and not some organization, an employer, a carrier, whatever, but if it's the patient who's going and securing the medication for their own personal use, just like doing 65 and a 55, is it illegal? Maybe. Is it enforced? No. So it came as a bit of a surprise when the FDA kind of cracked down on an organization or two that really their methodology for obtaining this medication is not that they themselves are purchasing drugs and selling it as if they were a pharmacy, but rather they're basically almost like acting like a broker where they're connecting the patient with the supplier, and this way it's the patient who's bringing it in themselves. And the actual sort of the crackdown by the FDA on this practice was pretty dramatic, and the language they were using was pretty severe. And as we've had a chance to really examine what the FDA said, you're starting to notice that maybe they're painting a picture that is not necessarily 100% accurate compared to who they're talking about.
Why are they doing this? If we look at the bullets, right?
Yeah.
I know we have a lot of stuff to cover in a short time. If they haven't seen any reports of anyone being harmed by any of these programs, what's going on?
Sure. So
are there bigger problems to deal with right now?
What they're doing is, so they're basically, the way they did this, the FDA basically told lawmakers, hey, look, we're going to crack down on these guys because they're an online pharmacy. They basically compared it to one of that, the spam mail you get in your inbox that says, hey, buy Viagra from this island nation somewhere.
But if you can't do this, if you can't do it, or if they're going to enforce it, and Brady, I'm going back to you too on this.
Yep.
Isn't it just going to make the prices of all the other drugs more expensive?
Yeah.
See, but here's the thing. If I'm a drug manufacturer, right, and you're telling me I have to reduce overall my prices being charged to U.S. Citizens in the United States, if I turn around and tell you, well, I'm already getting screwed by people who are buying the drugs internationally, could you potentially say, okay, listen, you reduce the prices of your drugs in the United States by 5%, we'll crack down on people who are buying drugs outside of the United States.
That's the point, though. It hasn't happened.
Right. I think some of what's going on here is that, and it's weird because you had, before this announcement came in the crackdown, the now former FDA commissioner was speaking before Congress and actually touted the fact that you can get Canadian drugs for a lot cheaper, which was interesting given the fact that his agency the next day said you can't do it anymore. But I think what's going on here too partly is maybe this is a case of the FDA sending signals to Congress to actually change the law and permit this, or they're trying to protect themselves, because if something does happen, or there's a widespread, poisoning of medication or something, people are going to start suing, and they're going to look at the government and say, why didn't you step in? Why didn't you act?
Right.
And that could be a problem there too. So
in their notification, they basically talk about counterfeit medication, overreactive or underreactive medication, drugs from unknown sources, which wasn't necessarily true of this particular firm, but it was, that was their concern overall.
I understand that, but again, I'm not saying it for myself because I don't need to do it, but Botox, okay? I mean, I don't need it, maybe eventually, but Botox. That's one of the big things. Botox is not covered by a typical health plan. I don't think. Jen, does ours cover it?
No.
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Right?
Ladies and gentlemen, he's asking Jen because she wrote the plan document, not because she needs it. I just want to clarify
I'm staring at the wrinkles on her forehead right now as we speak.
Oh, my Lord.
No, of course not. But my wife was telling me how when you get Botox, in Botox parties, some of the Botox is not legit. It's fake.
Sure.
Or it's counterfeit, whatever it might be. But it's knockoff Botox that people are injecting, and that's why you're seeing a lot of the problems, and it's dangerous.
Sure.
But, we have yet to have, again, we looked at our groups. I think until we actually see people getting arrested or a CEO of a company or a plan fiduciary or a sponsor being arrested for doing some of these things, I don't see that many of our clients are going to change their tune, because from a monetary standpoint, they have no choice. I mean, we just had recently here, folks, you don't know, a local supermarket chain, Stop & Shop, was on strike for the last 11 days.
Right.
Okay? And the number one thing they wanted was better benefits. And when I looked at their plan, so I looked at their actual employee benefit plan, they're on strike. They were on strike, folks, until yesterday. Their employee benefit plan is better than 90% of the plans that we write. No question.
Yeah.
Yet they were on strike about it. So, I think that I don't see this changing anything, because people at the end of the day are going to say, there's only so much money we have to spend, and if that's the way we're going to be able to get these drugs for these sick people, this is what we're going to do.
Right. I think to your point also, Adam, about there being a bigger meaning behind it. I mean, using the example again of doing 65 and a 55, if all of a sudden the police start stopping everybody who's speeding 65 and a 55, you're not going to think it's because they suddenly decided it's dangerous to do 10 over the limit. You're going to think, there's something going on in the background, that they're suddenly trying to meet a quota or raise money somehow.
Right.
There's something bigger at play.
As we get more information, I'm sure we're going to update people on these going forward.
Okay. So another thing, and Brady, you've been talking about this a lot in our podcast, is the fact that the ACA was challenged in court. We know with that Texas court that it was deemed to be unconstitutional. However, they did basically put out a say that the law would continue to be in place until the appeal was heard. And then there was the government shutdown, which slowed everything down. But one of the big things that you've been talking about a lot, and it's now been officially announced, is that the DOJ is not going to defend the federal law, which is highly unusual, because ordinarily the Department of Justice would defend the federal law, and it would be, some sort of state entity, if it's government driven, or a private entity, if it's private driven, is the one that's attacking it. So again, this really, I think, just sort of supports what you were already saying, which is that there were indications that it wasn't going to be supported. The thing is, people are probably saying, okay, well then who's paying the legal bills? If I don't have misinformation here, I believe it's some governors in states that support the ACA that is basically being driven from a state basis, which is funny because, like I said, it's almost like a flip of what you would normally see, where lawsuits are driven by governors against the federal government. And in fact, we'll talk a little bit later about one example where you do have state representatives pursuing action against a federal law. So I don't know if there's really anything else to say until we see some oral arguments, which are set for July. But we'll definitely keep an eye on that and let people know as that develops, because obviously if they end up deciding at a federal, national level that the ACA is illegal, probably something we'll want to talk about.
We're going to the Supreme Court next. So we'll keep you updated on that one.
Yep. Audits are coming. This is exciting, huh? So it's funny because Adam was complaining about having to wear his security tag with his ID on it so that he doesn't get dragged out of the building by the ISO police. But these HIPAA audits are actually a big deal. And it's funny because if you look online, well, funny, not if you're involved, just as one example, the MD Anderson, University of Texas, MD Anderson out in Texas, they actually are appealing, a penalty that was issued because of a HIPAA breach, $4.3 million. $4.3 million. Now you're probably thinking, man, this must have been some sort of, complex, crazy breach situation. Incorrect. There were apparently 3 mobile devices that were not properly encrypted that were stolen, and they had access to PHI. So for everybody who's listening on the phone right now, if you have PHI on your cell phone and it's not properly encrypted, for these guys, it led to a $4.3 million penalty. So, again, they've announced that there are these random audits that are going to be happening. So keep your eyes open for that. That being said, they've also made it very clear that for those who are, let's say, caught in the dragnet and it ends up that there's a problem, they're basically going to explain where the breach occurred and give you an opportunity to remedy the breach. So in some ways, I kind of see this as a blessing because for those of you like us who have already gone through a lot of HIPAA and other compliance measures at a private level and had consultants come in and really tighten everything up, you actually had to pay for that. Whereas here now, the government's going to do it on the taxpayer's dime, so that's not too shabby. But again, this is something that you need to keep your eyes open. If you receive any kind of notification or otherwise, let us know, and we will happily assist. Another hot topic that we need to talk about is the association health plans. And you might recall that association health plans prior to President Trump's issuing a rule, and then the DOL supporting that through a 2018 final rule, I think it was in June. And this was based on an edict from October 2017 by the president. Association health plans were very much limited in the sort of the check boxes, the characteristics you need to demonstrate in order to form an association health plan. So you have multiple employers that are otherwise unrelated, but they have to have some sort of commonality of interest, commonality of interest prior to this 2017 edict by President Trump and 2018 DOL rule was pretty hard to meet. And it included multiple things that needed to be in place. One, that you were employers, you were looking to have some commonality aside from just offering health benefits. It was pretty much agreed that you had to be within a certain geographic area and had to have a similar business interest. So it was more of an and, so 1 and 2. And after this 2018 DOL ruling, they basically take the and they change it to or. And they basically said, look, you could either be in the same business, but you could be geographically all over the place. That AHP opportunity sounded pretty cool at first until we found out that you had to comply with the state MEWA laws in every state where the AHP is located. That was kind of a killjoy right there. The second was that if you were basically in the same geographic area, but otherwise that was it. And in essence, what they were saying is that being in the same geographic area was tantamount to commonality of interest. If you're in the same area, you have a common interest, which opened all sorts of opportunities for employers that wanted to band together in a geographic area and form an association health plan. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess it depends on which side of the aisle you're standing on, 12 Democratic Attorney General, and this again goes right back to what I was saying about states challenging federal rules, with New York and our own Massachusetts leading the way, of course, right? Massachusetts, baby. They basically argued that this was inappropriate, that the DOL's interpretation of what commonality of interest is and it just being geographic didn't really jive with the rules that are set forth in ERISA, because ERISA requires a much sort of higher standard of commonality because you're basically being treated as a single employer when it comes to the benefit plan. So you therefore need to be similar to a single employer, that being having similar business interests. And Judge Bates, which is the judge that ended up hearing this, agreed that this basically violated ERISA's core concerns regarding the common interest. And as the judge put it, and I quote, ERISA imposes a common interest requirement, not merely a something in common requirement. Oh, I like that. Oh, you like that, huh? Ouch. And it doesn't help that the DOL actually failed to explain the rationale as to why shared geography does meet the commonality of interest. So it was kind of like, well, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Well, how could you say that this is a common interest? We can't, but, we're trying to do the right thing here. So that unfortunately is what led to this. Do I foresee that there may be appeals and it may go to a higher level? Certainly. But in the meantime, really what you're asking is, okay, Ron, I really wanted to form some association health plans or I already have. The ones that have already been formed, probably not a great idea to be recruiting and bringing in new plan members into the association health plan, number one. Number two, it behooves you to try and look for some commonality of interest amongst those plans besides just geography. So if you could find some sort of business interest that's common to all of the plan members and basically do the best you can to meet the requirements of an AHP before the October 2017 directive from President Trump, you should be okay. And we will keep you informed as this continues to roll out.
One thing I want to point out just really quick here, if it seems like we constantly are announcing new rules proposed by the federal government and then talking about how they're clogged up in court, it's because we are, right? So the administration since it failed to repeal the ACA, they've resorted to executive actions, which we've been talking about for years now. And what's happening is that they're forced to work within the existing framework of laws like ERISA and the ACA, and they're really going above and beyond what is allowed by those laws. And so every single time, at every point, it feels like the Trump people are being checked in court. It's because they are, and we're going to talk more about that in a few slides. But for now, Ron, back to you.
Yeah, it's definitely, you're right. I feel like we're caught in like a legislative ping pong match.
It is.
Where, it's basically the president says, well, if I could have gotten rid of the ACA, this would have been. So instead, I'm going to say I want this, and then the DOL releases some sort of rule, or HHS, and then you get the states come back and they knock it back, and it's just this back and forth. And meanwhile, we have to adjust our behavior and our practice based on which side of the ping pong table the ball is on. And so we're going back and forth, back and forth. I don't know about you, but I'm getting dizzy. So speaking of other things that are making me dizzy, again, just another example of a Trump administration rule that was issued. The regulating agency rolls out all these rules to try and make it happen. And then after it's been rolled out and people are taking action, suddenly court pumps the brakes in response to generally a liberal state filing some sort of legal motion. In this case, the Trump administration implemented a rule that said states could require some sort of work requirement for those who are enrolled in Medicaid. And this kind of came out side by side with the expansion of Medicaid coverage. And this is great, except that a U.S. District Judge Boasberg, for a second time in 9 months, struck down the administration's plan. He blocked Kentucky from implementing a plan, and he prevented Arkansas from continuing a plan they'd already implemented. And the idea behind this is that because Medicaid has been expanded, you need additional funds. And in order to create additional funds and savings, those who can work should work. Now, other people are rolling out these reports that say, the majority of people on Medicaid either are working, are looking for work, or incapable of working. So they say this won't actually have an impact. But on the flip side, you then have people like the governor of Kentucky, Matt Bevin, who's saying, well, if I can't have this work requirement, then I'm going to cancel the Medicaid expansion. And it's interesting that he said that.
But if we're going to have Medicare for all, why does the work requirement matter in the first place?
Well, look, I'm planning my retirement as soon as Medicare for All comes out. But that's the only reason I work for you, Adam, is this awesome health plan. But Governor Bevin, he actually said in response to that he was not going to do the expansion. And it's funny because then it ties right back into what Judge Boasberg actually said in the opinion, which is that part of the issue here is, in essence, that each individual state can hold Medicaid ransom until they get their state-based, work requirement rule approved by the governing agencies. In other words, I basically submit this to the HHS, to the DOL, and I say, hey, I'm going to expand Medicaid coverage, but only if you agree to my proposed rule. Now, if you're HHS, your hands are kind of tied because on the one hand, either we agree to it and, now all of a sudden you've got this maybe, and I'm not going to opine here, but maybe an overzealous work expansion, work requirement. Or on the other hand, I've got the state rolling back the expansion. And so now I have to decide which one's going to end up jettisoning more people off of Medicaid, the work requirement or the lack of expansion. So the fact that there's this ransom theory or issue was one of the reasons the judge ruled against the expansion. And then the governor of Kentucky literally comes out and says exactly what the judge warned them about. So, that was probably a bad move, dude. So anyway, Now, understand that this is only specific to a given geographic locale, and it doesn't necessarily regulate the ability of other states outside that area from doing this. So what we anticipate is as this continues to happen in different states and areas of the country, eventually it will work its way up to the Supreme Court. And so we will also keep you informed as that happens as well. And with that, I'm going to take a breath now and pass it back over to Brady.
Thanks, Ron. I can see why that made you dizzy. And staying with the theme of being
Ron
dizzy.
just doesn't like that anyone else gets to talk, especially you, Brady.
Listen,
He's gonna do it. I mean, he gets, Ron now has slowly lost slides. You notice that over the years, it just slowly has gone down, and Brady's taken over, Ron.
You know, he got the
folks,
political.
If you agree with me that Brady is trying to take Ron's job and there's something going on here between the two of them, please email me directly, because I think there's something going on. I'm their boss.
You know what, Adam? I'm going to give Brady the benefit of the doubt. He hitched his wagon to the right star. He took over the political slides.
Right time.
And it has been the most political era in our industry ever. I don't know how he knew.
You used to have like 15 slides. You're down to like 5.
Well, that's because I'm like the chef that prepares dessert, and no one wants to eat dessert anymore. It's my fault for picking the wrong thing.
Well, he's serving the main course.
He's the main course, man. I know.
You're acknowledging that.
All right. He's a meatless patty that everybody wants to eat.
Brady,
He is.
Sir Brady, as I will call you from now on.
Thank
Sir
you.
Brady,
I like
take
that.
over.
Thanks, Adam. So what we want to talk about now is something that's also been evolving, staying with the theme and title of this webinar, which is what's going on with the contraceptive coverage rules, right? It's been a while since we had a check-in.
Well, I thought this was over.
Well, that's what people thought that as well. But people are asking us, what do TPAs need to do? What do employers have to know? I just want to give a quick, because I know we're running out of time here, a quick high-level recap of what the new rules were, how we got to where we're at. Recall that a couple years ago now, at least, the Hobby Lobby case basically expanded the opt-out for the contraceptive coverage mandate under the ACA to include for-profit, closely held private companies. That was a big deal Supreme Court case, which basically expanded the number of employers who can now be granted an exemption or an accommodation to those rules. So those are the two options, by the way, and they're key to remember. You can either qualify for an exemption or an accommodation based on what kind of entity you are. So if you're a house of worship, or if you're a grandfathered plan, you can be exempt from the requirement entirely. If you are not one of those things, if you're religiously affiliated and you're a nonprofit, or you're a closely for-profit, closely held corporation like Hobby Lobby, you can opt out of providing contraceptive coverage by electing an accommodation, but you won't be eligible for an expansion or exemption rather. So in those cases, the women involved who are not getting their coverage have to be offered coverage by the TPA, not the employer. So the TPA would be covering the cost of a contraceptive coverage. That was how this was a couple years ago. Then the Trump administration passed some new rules back in November 2018, which expanded the exemption and accommodation process even more by including something called the moral objection. So not just now the religious objection to ACA birth control rules. Now if you have a moral objection, and that rule was published and was scheduled to go into effect in January, but they were blocked. Once again, we have some Democratic states who are filing motions in court for an injunction, and they were granted one. A Pennsylvania federal judge actually put the sort of temporary nail in the coffin where he issued a nationwide injunction blocking all of these rules. Now, we have an update for you, which is that in March, the end of March, the government filed a brief to appeal this injunction. And I think it's actually a pretty well-written brief. And I did read it all, and the argument is one about standing that they're making. They're saying that because these rules haven't actually gone in place yet, there's no impact, there's no actual damage to anyone, so it's not ripe to be addressed. So they can't sue yet. And so as of this writing, the appeal is still ongoing. As of a couple weeks ago, the final rules are still blocked nationwide. So what do TPAs need to know? They need to know that they're operating under the old rules. So if you're a TPA for an employer that requests an accommodation, and you as a TPA have the obligation of providing coverage for birth control instead of the employer. That's not changed, and we'll keep following the appeal as it works its way through the courts and let you know if those new rules are put into effect again. And in fact, I actually covered that slide already, so I'm going to move again to the next one, which is back to Jen.
Brady,
ahead of myself. Sorry, guys.
See, right there is an example of when now Brady, because I called him sir,
yeah.
All of a sudden he thinks he's the man, and he just screwed up. I was literally trying to tell you to advance to the next slide because you were talking about the next slide.
In the moment, Adam, what can I say?
And you notice how Ron didn't help?
I noticed that.
Ron did not try to help you. I noticed that as well. Just saying, there's something going on.
Fall on my sword. Jen, over to you.
All right, let's bring it home, literally.
Now we have Switzerland back. Come on, Switzerland, let's go.
So, what are we talking about here? Massachusetts has a paid family leave act
The rule is you don't have to work ever again, and we'll still pay your salary and all your benefits. That's how it is here in Massachusetts.
Sign it? Yeah. So, what we need to know about this is that starting in 2021, there are certain individuals, employees, who are going to be eligible for a paid family leave. So the paid leave in Massachusetts is going to vary, and does vary a bit from what is under FMLA. So in order for Massachusetts to offer this type of leave, we need to figure out how to pay for it. So starting this July 1st, there's going to be a tax that will be imposed at 0.63%, don't ask me to do the math, that is something that employers are going to have to worry about paying this budgeting for, so that by the time that it turns 2021, this would be a benefit that's going to be available for their employees. But what's really important here, and why we're talking about this, is because there's going to be an impact to our plan documents, right? Always comes back to that. So not only is there the availability of this paid family leave, but while individuals are out on this leave 12 weeks or the combined 26 weeks per year for a medical leave, the coverage under the plan must continue. And the coverage under the plan must continue at the same rate that it is currently. So the employees are going to have to pay for their contributions, but the employer is going to have to contribute as well.
For the 95% of our listeners who are not from Massachusetts, why do they care?
Because this is going to be something that other states are starting to do. New York has already done something like this. There's a lot of regulations out there that Massachusetts is usually the ringleader when it comes to these types of paid leave. So
Omnicare, right?
That's right, we were the first.
So when it comes to something like this, other states are paying attention. And when it comes to these, and this rule still has 2 years before it goes into effect.
So what do they have to do now to prepare themselves?
Budget. You have to make sure that you can pay for this tax, and that you have documents in place, you have policy in place.
So the employee handbook updates, the SPDs are consistent, they mirror, and a stop-loss carrier is going to cover you in the same situation.
That's right.
Good. Yeah. Folks, check your inbox now. I was advised by our marketing guru, Hannah, that every one of you, except for me, apparently, have received the FIA Group's newsletters in your inbox. Check them out. They got some really cool stuff in them, and we're really excited to share that information with all of you. Our next webinar is going to be May 23rd, 1 o'clock. Hopefully by then, our temperature will hit 50. I'm looking forward to it. What's the topic? I guarantee you it's going to involve more Brady and less Ron. It seems to be going that way, and I'm really sad, Ron, just like being honest with you. I never want to stop saying this. On behalf of Ron Peck,
That's me.
Brady Bizzarro, Jennifer McCormick, and your amazing host, Adam Russo, thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar. We hope to see you in 30 days. Thank you.